Okay, it is 5 o'clock. Will you stand and join me for the pledge of the flag? Okay, we'll begin this evening with our open forum. Is there anyone that would like to come forward and address the board at this time? Okay, next we have approval of tonight's agenda. Is there a second? Okay, all those in favor of the agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next we have the consent items.
Move to approve.
Okay, okay, we have a motion and a second.
Hey, Jill, when you vote, can you take yourself off mute?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even know.
Yep, I don't know if, Jill, can you hear us?
Can you hear us, Jill? You're on mute, it looks like.
Muting her or no?
There's a line through the speaker.
Can you hear us, Jill? Thumbs up?
Yes, I can.
Okay, we got you. All right, we have you now.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, we're on the consent items. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the consent items signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries. Next we have reports. Dr. Funk.
Most of my talking tonight will be later on when we're talking about goals. Just a couple of things. We've had our second e-learning day today. Tried to get school in this morning. We didn't look like we were going to get the snow we thought we were. So we thought we might be pretty good, but the ice was just, it was too dangerous with the ice. So we waited till 8, thought we could maybe treat it, but it didn't quite work out. So, and then of course the weather looks blizzard-like below zero for Thursday night into Friday. So could be a short week of school here. But you know, we keep the safety of the kids first at all times, and that's how we go about with our decision making, and our staff, of course, as well. So, and you'll hear more from me here in a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, it is very slippery out there, that's for sure. Jill, would you like to start with the school board reports? Oh, she's on mute again.
Yes.
Okay.
I attended the MSBA conference. That's all I have today. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Kim?
Am I on? I also attended the MSBA conference, and it's as always, it's like a kid in a candy store. It's a lot of fun to see people that you know from other districts, and also the sessions they have are it's just frustrating. You can't go to more than one per session. So yeah, it was a good experience. The keynote speaker was excellent.
MSBA conference, and I'll report a little more later on that.
I too attended the MSBA conference.
I did not attend the MSBA concert, but good thing is I was up at the Capitol the week before with our students from District 241. We had a great turnout, and in the years that I've worked with youth and government, this was a very engaged group, the different program areas they were in. So it's a great experience for them, and I actually have students now. I was just talking, looks like I'll have several that want to go to Model United Nations in at the end of March. So I'm excited with that, and anybody ever has questions on that, please let me know. But again, great group of students.
And I also attended the MSBA conference. So, moving on to teacher report, Lisa Duggar.
Oh, it is on? Okay.
Just a quick question. I always wonder, how does the e-learning days work out for the teachers and everything? Do you get much feedback? Do you guys talk about it much, or?
Thank you. Moving on to curriculum and instruction, we have policy 613, graduation requirement. Kathy Nebor.
So good evening. You all received a copy of the grad requirement policy. The substantial changes in the policy are as a result of the grad rule expiring for our students who are hitting the ages of 20 and 21 now. So the class of 2015 was the last graduation class that was required to pass an MCA or take it multiple times with remediation in between. Those class of 2015, those students are now most 21, if not beyond, so they age out of the K-12 school system. That is the vast majority of what is in red on your policy, is taking out grad rule. And it's the first of 3 policies that'll be coming forward. Testing policy will be coming forward as well, taking out of that policy and adding in some new pieces. So on test administrator, instead of naming a staff member in particular, it'll change to the superintendent's designee as the district assessment coordinator. And that district assessment coordinator term is used by the Department of Ed, so we have to be in a line with that, and only one person can be that person, and they access all the state reports. So again, the graduation requirements, credit-wise, have not changed, but all of this in red is getting rid of the grad rule. Somebody asked me the other day about the writing test, when that's coming, and although that was again passed by the legislature a couple of years ago to reinstitute the writing MCA, no money has been allocated for the Department of Ed to do anything with it, so nothing has been done with that test. On about your page 5, there's a note about taking the nationally normed college entrance exam in grade 11 or 12. There was only one class, and that was the class of 2016 that was required to take it for graduation. And now you'll see the language says encouragement to participate. And we must offer it. So we offer it one day, and you heard Mark Grossklaus earlier this year talk about also offering the AccuPlacer and hopefully the ASVAB on that same day. One piece that's added is a student's progress towards career and college readiness must be recorded on a student's high school transcript. We record ACT scores, as do most districts across the state now, to represent that. The Department of Ed said the other option, of course, is you can put MCA grade 8 scores, as that's their college and career readiness benchmark, but we don't put grade 8 of anything on high school transcripts. And plus, there's 2 conflicting laws about parents having to give permission to release MCA scores. So pretty much every school district notes ACT scores there. Again, a lot of red to get rid of the grad rule, the ACT requirement, a little bit of addition of language to satisfy academic standards. Geometry is listed in the standards now as a requirement or its equivalent. Algebra 1 credit, which really has been in place for a long time for us in grade 8. The civics test, which is not specifically listed in here, but it will be in the future. Our current sophomores will have to pass a percentage of questions on the civics test, and our social studies department is working on that by the time they hit their senior year. So we don't really have anybody who's gotten to that point yet. They have to pass 30 of 50 of the questions, and they will be given all the questions ahead of time. They're already out on the website, so that's coming. Two new pieces, if you look on page 9. One is that a computer science credit may now fulfill a math credit if it aligns with state academic standards. And so we have a lot of students who have, they take geometry as a 9th grader, algebra 2 as a 10th grader, and pretty much our options for those kids for that 3rd year of math elective is pre-calc and then calc. Some take stats. Well, the legislation now allows us to align with computer science. We don't currently offer a computer science course. We've had some students take it independently, AP Computer Science. So that's something that I passed along to the high school to consider. But the next one does impact us, and that's the Project Lead the Way credit. And in particular, this is the Intro to Engineering course. May meet the state academic standards in math or science. And we know there's several districts in the state where that full year course meets the physics requirement. And so students must take a year of physics or a year of chemistry. And this legislation and then putting into policy allows us to use a Project Lead the Way Intro to Engineering full year course for physics. Now they could take a half a year and then a half a year of chemistry, but so that's a new option, pretty specific. Several school districts, Anoka Hennepin being the largest, they already align that. Interesting study last year where they did a study on, and it was a small study, small group of students who took the Project Lead the Way course and then took the physics final exam and fared just as well on the final exam as the students who took physics. So several districts out there are doing that, so that could also be an option for us. Moving down, you'll see a school district must use current world language standards developed by the American Council on the Teacher of Foreign Languages. We did that last year, so that's being implemented this year, so that's that's the standard we're using already. So those are, looks like a lot of changes, but it's just getting rid of the grad rule because it doesn't exist anymore in statute, and the Department of Ed doesn't give that part of the test anymore.
So Kathy, what's the follow-up with the policy committee that once the board passes this, what's the policy committee going to be looking at?
So there's 2 other policies on testing, 14 and 615. One has to do with English language learners and accommodations because MCA has put in some new linguistic supports, and so we need to note those in policy. So that one will be coming up. And then 615 is basically taking all of the grad rule piece out of our testing policy and putting in all of the new pieces with and noting Pearson Access, which we've done a lot of that already, but Pearson is specifically named in the next round of policies as the website we access to test, which I think is, I mean, it is what we use, so that will be coming up in the, I pulled those policies today, and so we'll be moving those forward in the next month or so. And then there's also the instructional materials policy, which Mary Jo and her designee will work on.
Kathy, you mentioned when the day that we offer the ACT that there'll be AccuPlacer and another test being given. Is the idea, talk to me about that a little
Sure.
bit. I don't know if it falls into this, but
sure.
since I'm new.
So statute says we must offer ACT on a school day. But we have a lot of students who have found over the years, as more and more kids take the ACT, that maybe that isn't to their advantage, that there are some other college entrance exams. So we choose the ACT. Mark Grossclose is working with Riverland to try to also offer the AccuPlacer. There's a few road bumps right now. Hopefully they'll work those out. So we have some students who would take the AccuPlacer or ASVAB. I forget the person who comes in and does the ASVAB, they do that for free. AccuPlacer Riverland offers for free. We also are looking at, since it's our 11th graders and 10th graders who haven't taken the ACT, could we offer the AccuPlacer that day to our 10th graders who are coming up at the end of their 10th grade year, not having to pull them out of another day of class. So Mark is working diligently on that. Yeah, so he talked about that last fall, and the board approved that as an opportunity for the high school to pursue. Yeah.
So Kathy, what do we enter on their transcript if they don't take the ACTs that shows progress toward college and career readiness?
So we don't enter anything else at that point. We establish that they have a 4-year plan, which through Naviance. So that is kind of that. So what do you do? Because you have to allow them to opt out if they don't want to take the ACT. And so then what other option? Right now, the larger districts are saying we offer that option to put that on their ACT, and yet we want to honor their right not to take that exam.
Dave, you asked my question, and I think probably we both share the concern that once again it would appear that we are attending to requirements relative to college readiness, but not so much career readiness and
Right.
vocational training and non-college students.
And I think the intent with, until this year, the ACT is the only assessment we gave on the day we give the ACT. And so the intent is, all right, well, if we have kids who want to go to Riverland or some other technical or community college, an entrance piece of that, component of that, is if they don't take the ACT, is the AccuPlacer. So we're able to do that with that piece of it. Where I would really like to go with this eventually is utilize WorkKeys, which is more of a trades type test than it is an academic one. And potentially we could offer that on the same day as well for those kids who are interested in something like that. So.
And Val Qualley from Workforce Center does come over and administer WorkKeys to many, many of our students through our work programs. So that would be another option that we could, although I don't know what those scores look like, putting them on a transcript. But Workforce Center has been amazing to work with out of Riverland. Val Qualley has put in a lot of time and energy with our work program students.
Is that something where we need to work with the state more than, and I'm trying to understand the grad standard piece, but the MCAs are basically meaningless now as far as, that
Yes.
probably wasn't the nice way to put it.
Yes.
But if we're working on that, then do we somehow need to work with the state level to get them to change and recognize, whether it be we take the AccuPlacer or some of these other work ones, which we've had a lot of discussions at business education, and is that something we as a board need to be pushing on, or where do we go with that?
Yes, and you're going to see something here coming up here about career and college readiness that I'm going to show you in a little bit. But we had, this is probably 2-3 years ago now, we had a committee from the legislature in this very room talking on state standards. And the question I asked them was, as you just, stated, Dennis, okay, we have standards aligned to the MCA through 11th grade, really. And we have kids who know that we have to take this test. It doesn't mean anything to us. Why do we care? And yet, now, and at that point, the legislature had come in and they had stated, well, now we want everybody to take the ACT. So now you're requiring us to take the ACT, and yet the test you're requiring us to take, in addition to the MCA, is not aligned with our standards at all. So where are we at? And so from a systems-wide or statewide angle, there's a lot of pressure that from the Chamber of Commerce, the statewide Chamber of Commerce, that we don't have high enough standards in math in particular. And so, and now you're hearing the writing graduation requirement is coming back. And so there's tension both ways on what do we want our kids to know? And so that's where, when Neil says, okay, well, we have, now, what about those kids who aren't going to college? What we are forced to do as an administration in the district is really a balancing act of, okay, how are we able to give the ACT, but still meet the needs of these other students who aren't going on to college? And how do we record that to meet the needs of the state? So that's where we're at, I think, as a society is, all right, where are the needs and is everyone going to go on to a four-year college? No, they're not. Okay, well, the state's got to recognize that. And I think through our legislators, I think that that's a possibility that we could, try to influence that, at least for our community.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would think that with all the focus on vocational careers that every school is trying to do right now, that there would be changes at the state level, understanding that. So, but it does need to come, I suppose, from pressure from different school districts to do that.
So there's two pieces out there. One, through the Perkins Consortium, is they're really pushing all students have at least one technical skills exam in one course. And there's one out there now that we're working with the consortium on for our work program students, and it's a general work skills course. And there's an exam for that. And then otherwise, students would have to take probably 2 consecutive courses, and then they would be able to take they're called technical skills assessments, and they would come out with a certification of some sort, different than we used to do with the articulation agreements with Riverland or our community colleges, where students could take a course and get 1 credit out of a 3-credit course. So there's that technical skills assessment push, and then there's a push to look at the ACT being the only exam offered at the high school, and not any MCAs. You may see that we have a change in the commissioner, so we'll see. That was the discussion last spring, coming out of ESSA and the federal reauthorization. So yeah, there's a couple things out there, but pushing for a technical skills assessment, that's kind of a no-brainer. That's a pretty easy. That's a much easier piece for us as school districts to implement. There's a couple of organizations out there that offer them, that do a really nice job, help our CTE teachers say, here's the technical skills assessment for electrician 1, or, even a lower one than that. Here's what the standards are, and then here's what the assessment will look like out here. And right now we go and we tick in our Perkins report that we took 12 kids took a TSA in that course. That gets uploaded to the state, and we get Perkins funding for our consortium, secondary and post-secondary, as a result for that. So I think that is another way to go for career ed, but just my opinion.
I have a question.
Sure.
On looking at the credits and the requirements for graduation, I've always kind of wondered this, and I never asked. So 8th graders, do their credits count for graduation, and do their grades count for GPA?
They do not, except in one situation, and that's for mathematics. If they are on the accelerated track, we have probably 1 to 3 students a year who maybe as a 7th grader will do an interactive TV class with the high school and take maybe the intermediate algebra. So they work with Gail Brownlow from our Gifted and Talented program. So as 8th graders, they take a geometry course, which is required for graduation. So because it's required for graduation, once they become a 9th grader, that geometry class that they took as an 8th grader gets transcripted. And then they take another math class, typically Algebra 2, as freshmen, and then that gives them the opportunity to do pre-calc, calc, and some other opportunity for mathematics. Yeah, good question.
What appears then is really this assessment piece is
Yeah, I mean, I think that we need to assess kids with assessments that fit where they're going, what their interest is in life. And we, unfortunately, in public education, we have a one-size-fits-all assessment, and that's a challenge.
Okay, good comments and questions. What are your wishes on this policy? Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Okay,
What is the current requirement for world languages?
We have no requirement for world languages for graduation. It's part of our electives, so they can take up to 15 electives. They need a minimum of 15 electives to graduate, but we do not have world languages as a graduation requirement. The requirement in this policy is that they be aligned with these national standards.
okay. Any other questions? Okay, we'll call the questions. All those in favor of changing policy 613 to the recommendation signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to the MSBA conference feedback. Dr. Funk.
Yeah, just soliciting information from board members on some things that they found of interest at the conference, and really a time to share with each other on what transpired here. So I'll just.
Sure. I had the opportunity to actually attend Phase 1 and Phase 2 training as a new board member. Some of the things in Phase 1 that we covered was MSBA framework and its board, the meeting structure that we have, boards and superintendent roles, and then new members having a mentor potentially, and then orientation of new board members. In the Phase 2 training, which was the second day, we heard from one of the House research members. There's a department at the House that researches and gets back to, or, does all of the education research. And so that was really interesting. Personnel and collective bargaining was another interesting. I felt like Phase 2 was just a lot of information and a lot of good stuff that I wouldn't have, that we need to be reminded of. So, open meeting laws and other laws affecting school boards, and then school finance and school budgets. So a lot of information in that day. And then just real quickly, some of the conference highlights for me. I thought the keynote speaker on trust in an organization was really good. And the takeaway that I had is asking that question, how? So when there's something comes up, that's great. We've identified that it came up, but how are we gonna take care of it? And then different workshops that I went to were on the governance model, Minnesota State High School League, the equity dashboard to raise student achievement, strong partnerships and community and boosters. And just a personal note, I enjoyed the schools that presented during the showcase. That was fun for me to see. A lot of them had students there, and it was fun to see them interact. And I would love for Albert Lea to have something in that showcase. So.
Yeah, I'm not a new school board member. I'm an old school board member, so I didn't go to the sessions you went to. But once again, it's always a pleasure to attend workshops and roundtables and listen to the keynote speaker. I'm not prepared to go into any details to the sessions that I attended. I can just mention them and then briefly describe them. One that is sort of dear and near to me is interacting with outside organizations, like Boosters Club and the Education Foundation. Dennis and I are on that committee, which is a huge Boosters Club for the whole district. And there's some interesting, there's necessities, advantages, and some pitfalls. The presenter suggested, and it sounds like a good idea, but I can't see a lot of our boosters clubs ever agreeing to it. Rather than having a booster club for every activity, have one big boosters club for the whole school, for the whole gamut of activities. That would be kind of an invasion of a lot of turf that has been built up by, well, I think probably the two most active boosters clubs in our district are hockey and wrestling. And I can't see either of those, you know, subordinating their interest to the interest of a huge organization. But it's an interesting concept. But the issues, of course, are always these clubs, and it's true, the same thing is true of the Education Foundation. These boosters organizations do a lot, and they're necessary. We can't operate without them. And they raise a lot of money. But then the pitfall there is oftentimes because of the fact that they do so much, they work so hard, and they raise so much money, they sometimes fall into the danger, a pitfall of managing the district or attempting to. So, you know, it's something that both the district and boosters organizations have to be aware of. And I said I wasn't going into great detail, but I guess I already did. Sorry. I'll be brief. I went to and so did Ken, the usual, because it's something that we deal with at meetings. It's parliamentary procedure. It sounds mundane and uninteresting, but you know, it's very necessary, and it is kind of interesting. All of my teaching career, I never really did understand, and Angie would know this, the organization of special education. And so I went to a session that explained the ins and outs of special education, and that was useful. It cleared up, you know, I've been hearing the terminology and some of the jargon all my life, but I now have a little bit better handle on that. I went to a session on finance communications, which was well done, but the title had me confused because it had nothing to do with what I thought it was going to deal with. So I thought I was going to, you know, learn all about school finance, and that wasn't the case. And then I went to a session about the superintendent's contract and negotiation of that contract, mostly because I'm very much interested in negotiations, and that was interesting. That's it.
Jill?
Okay, hopefully you can, okay. I attended a workshop about superintendent evaluations, and they said the best practices are to have evaluations 2 times per year. So I think that would be a good thing for us to start as a district to follow those best practices. We also have a new evaluation model, which not only has goals, I think it had 3 goals, but it also incorporated 2 standards. And you could pick whatever elements of those standards that you would like to have in that particular period of time's evaluation. So I would like us also to look at that new model. I do have that information that I can share with you. I also attended a workshop on employee discipline, and some of the interesting pieces were that whenever there is an oral reprimand, so for example, someone gives a directive to an employee, whether to improve on something or stop doing something, those things should all be documented and in the file, in the employee file. And that documents should remain in the employee file. They should never be negotiated to be removed at a later date, because that is to the benefit of the district to leave the documents there. Thank you.
Just to highlight a couple, I spent some time with the MSHSL. I do that every year to get their update, and it was kind of interesting. They talked a little bit about educational athletics, and spent a little bit of time on that. But what I thought was kind of interesting, because of things we've heard over the last few years about changing the way of athletics, they talked about the goal was still to win, but the purpose was to have both personal and physical growth. So I thought that was, again, interesting, kind of a reaffirmation of athletics. I mean, kind of like, I guess, testing in the classroom. You're still there to compete and do your best, and how do we get the students to that level. Another one that I enjoyed amongst several was one that was called Ethical Issues for School Board Members. And it talked about the limited duties of a school board member. Basically, outside the table, we don't have any power. We can't go around and tell employees what to do. We can't sign contracts unless we are given that position by the school board or the school district. And then it also talked a lot about the Minnesota Governmental Data Practices Act, and how information that really only information that the person, if it's about a certain person, they have to be aware of it, and they have to also give permission to let that information out, and about some of the issues by letting out different types of information, board information, whatever it would be, without any kind of informed consent, and some of the penalties that could take place with that. So I thought that was very interesting. And then finally, the showcase. The one that I enjoyed the most was the Heart of Lakes Fishing League. Kind of like we're starting up our trap team now this year. Now they've got a league for fishermen, and it was out of Hawley School. And I thought, again, we've got quite a good little fishing group going on here in the area. So maybe that's something we start looking at again, kind of diversifying our scope. But these guys and gals had their little shirts on with all their sponsors on, just like you'd see on TV. So they really had a lot of fun with it. And again, something that maybe we'll look at in the future here at Albert Lee.
All right. Our keynote speaker was great. He spoke about trust, and it probably isn't the most important thing, but it was the most surprising piece. He has got 8 pillars of trust, and one of them was clarity. And I didn't ever would think, like, you have to be clear, and that's probably a place where I need to get better. But anyway, just interesting. I didn't think that would be one of the pillars of trust. Another thing I went to is the legislative agenda for MSBA, and 3 of their things that they're really going to focus on. The reduction of special ed paperwork. They really feel that they're going to make a difference this year. I shared that with some special ed teachers yesterday when we had a staff development, and they're not buying it. However, Tim Walz, that's also something that's a passion of his, like something he wants to get done too, so I don't know. But I think it's something, even with the passion there, it's hard to get right unless you're a special ed teacher, to know how to actually do that. So hopefully they can do something there. That'd be really exciting, especially for teacher retention and stuff, because special ed teachers, there's a high burnout rate. And then the 2 other things that they're going to focus on, MSBA, increase in the general ed formula by 3%, and then increase special ed funding. And then one thing that Tim Walz had spoke to, and one thing that he also wanted to do is funding equity, for outstate districts and stuff. So I thought that was kind of cool. So that's kind of exciting. A couple of the things I went to, one was power of choice, and that was kind of cool. They just what they did in their district is just try something new. Just try something new. And then everyone was supposed to try something new. So then different principals and different teachers just talked about new things that they tried. One of the things is something that we've actually done too is having kindergarten and your kids new to a school start a day early, and they found great success with that, just that we have. Another thing that they did that was kind of interesting, they kind of did something, they're doing the e-learning on their snow days and stuff, but they also have flexible learning. And they kind of tied that in when they were doing some of these other days for the other kids, some were doing flexible learning. And as many districts have a problem getting enough subs, they've been using flex learning for their subs. you know, like when they can't get a sub instead of trying to like scrounge. And they're like, yeah, we know, we know everyone was worried that this was not going to work. Like the kids are not going to be working, but they have like their commons is like right under where like the principal sit, you know, like his office and then I think the secretary. So they don't have anyone right out there with them, but they have people looking over them, and the kids seem to be working and getting their stuff done. So that could be an option, but I do think there would have to be some kind of supervision. But that was interesting, and they said it worked really well for them. I also went to the student board member thing, which is kind of cool. There was 2 student board members, and it was just people asked them questions. They're really great student board members, just like we have. One reason I actually went to that is I think our student board members are great. I'd like to get more diversity if we could, and I don't know the answer for that, and I was kind of looking to hope to get an answer. I did not get the answer. It seems like their student school board members are pretty, you know, like very high flyers, very, you know what I mean, very similar to like who we're getting, which are amazing students, which are great, but if we could find a way to get some more diversity there, I think that would be great. And I think that's about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Angie. I think everyone's kind of covered most everything here, but I did attend an MSBA strategic planning session and board chair Q&A, which is always interesting, and then things on parliamentary procedure and open meeting laws. So, as always, it was a great time, not only with the sessions, but meeting with the board. So, it was great. So, our next item of business is district goals for 2019. Dr. Funk.
So we have a new board, and we really never established goals this school year yet as far as moving forward. So I thought tonight would be a great opportunity to kind of recap what we did last year, and then in the middle of this presentation, I'm going to talk about some initiatives that are going on at the legislature, and then at the end of it, I'm going to talk through some proposed ideas for next year. And so as part of what I think Jill has mentioned here, this whole evaluation process, what I would suggest with the board is I have some proposed goals for you tonight. You know, I know sometime in the near future we can sit down and probably have an evaluation on where we were and where we want to go, and this will give you some food for thought as far as moving forward. So tonight, first of all, you can see up here, these were the goals from last year. Values identification process, working with building leaders to implement decision-making at the site level. They know best what's for staff and students, increase growth and proficiency, maintain our fund balance, and figure out a strategy on how to deal with the whole Hammer complex. And as you can see, as we did start last fall, or the fall of 2017, and we continued with the fall of 2018, we had building leaders come in and give updates on where they are, at least academically, to the school board. So next slide. So here's just briefly some of the things that we accomplished last year. We did do a values identification process throughout the district, brought it up through the board level, and those are the 4 values that we identified as the values of our district. Through the whole process, we utilize respect, integrity, compassion, and collaboration. We worked diligently, I think, to have our site leadership teams really focus more on instruction and get away from some of the minutia of what we deal with. You know, who's planning this party here, when, and really shift their focus more on instruction. At the same time, we have a district learning team at the district level that's made up of teachers and administrators. There's actually one more teacher than there's administrator on the team, and it's representation throughout the district. And they really have kind of taken the ball and run with the instructional improvement side of things. And then it flows back to the building leadership teams in the building, and it works. I think what we're seeing is we are starting to see teams of teacher leaders in each building start to do better things, which hopefully will continue to improve our student growth in the district. Our test results were not what we liked, as we heard this past fall from our principals. However, one good positive thing there was our high school AP exam emphasis has ended up having, I think Albert Lea High School, one of 5 or 6 school districts in the high schools in the state, have been placed on the AP honor roll. So that's a positive for us. We did maintain our fund balance at 14%, and we successfully garnered community support for updates to Hammer and a new gym in Halverson on our first try. So those were very positive for the district there. Go ahead. Next, I've received this from MREA, which is one of our lobbying groups that we have here. And what I'd like to show you here, this was presented, this is just a piece of it. This was presented last week at a finance committee, but this will give you, we hear about some issues here in Albert Lea, and this will give you a little bit of a statewide flavor on some of the things that districts in outstate Minnesota are faced with, so that we don't feel like we're not alone in some of these things. Okay, the first one is funding student needs. Go ahead, Ashley. And Kim, I think you saw this last week, but this is the delta, the difference between the consumer price index, which is orange there, and actually the funding we get from the state, which is in the green. And if you look back to 2003, so about 15, 16 years ago now, you can see we were right on with the CPI. And you can see that we are not keeping up, school districts are not keeping up from the state formula, the money we get from the legislature, with the cost of inflation. And so what happens then, of course, is districts are compelled to go to their voters for operating levies to make up that difference. Go ahead. The other piece of this is when people do go out and build new facilities, we are not, we have the ache to school credit, which is new, but our local share on new facilities is still almost 94% local. So that is a concern for local taxpayers. Okay. We've heard about the teacher crisis for a number of years now. Go ahead. This is some interesting information. 1,400 teachers retire in Minnesota each year, and we'll get you these slides too. Problem is, we have a decline since 2012 of 20% of teacher graduates. So that, in real numbers, that's 517 fewer teachers are graduating statewide from our colleges. Here are some of the more difficult positions to fill. I think there's one school in the state right now, I think it's either Mankato or state, that has industrial arts teachers. That's it. Family and consumer science. Kathy, how many special ed probationary or 3 years or less teachers do we have in the district? 25. So that is a significant challenge for us.
How many special ed teachers do we have total?
I couldn't give you that off the top of my head. And that includes like licensed school nurses, anybody who fits in that, school psychologists, school social workers, special education classroom teachers. But I don't know that number off the top of my head.
We'll give it to you in an update. And then you can see the least difficult to fill are on the right there. So this is just interesting. Mark and I were talking to a class last week, teacher cadets, kids interested in becoming teachers at the high school. And so I talked to them about social studies. I was a social studies teacher. And I told them in the early 90s when I was applying for jobs as a social studies teacher, there were, if I was in the metro area, there were about 700 applicants per position. Outside Minnesota, 100 to 200 applicants per position. I asked Mark, I said, how many social studies applicants did you have last year? 12. So, I mean, it's a different world we're starting to operate in. This is an interesting chart here as well. For rural teachers, Tier 3 and Tier 4 are your traditional teachers. They are, they work on getting a traditional teacher license. They might not have been able to pass the test first go-around, so they might not be at the Tier 4 level yet. But your Tier 1 and 2, 1 is really a skills person who has a lot of experience in the trades. And you can see, roughly 2/3 of our teachers are traditional license, and we have to get variances of some sort for about 1/3 of them. And this is outstate Minnesota. And you can see that oftentimes 37% of the teachers, well, no, not 37. So, excuse me. The red there says hired from another Minnesota district. So the blue is Tier 3 or 4 who have the license. Red is they have a license, but they come from somewhere else in the state of Minnesota. And Tier 1 and 2 are teachers who are on variance there. Special needs. This is this impacts us in an interesting way. We have seen a significant increase. I think we started at the end of last year with about 650 students, give or take, on IEPs. I think we are about 75 above that right now, so we're well over 700. And so what we're seeing is, since we are a regional center, we're seeing a lot more, I think, special ed students that maybe come from smaller districts. That's part of the reason we entered into the special ed cooperative with Austin to deal with some of the challenges we face with our more severe needs students. But so we're seeing it because some of the smaller districts they're not able to keep up with some of the unique needs that students are facing. Next, and then of course, here's what we're talking about, one size fits all, and we need to have personal learning plans that meet the needs of our students, where they're at and where they're going, as opposed to just, here's the standard, you need to pass it to graduate. And there is a talk, and we hear this when I go and I meet with elementary teachers. They always tell me there's not enough time in the day, and oftentimes social studies or science gives because we have too much emphasis on reading and math at the elementary level. And so how do we do the proper balance? So these are some of the things that are being talked about by the Minnesota Rural Education Association at the legislature that have been identified as concerns in outstate Minnesota. So questions on any of that before I move on to the rest of my presentation?
It was kind of briefly touched upon, kind of with the special ed and special needs students, but what about like gifted, talented? Like, is it more difficult for us to serve them, and what can you share about how we do serve them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think Kim and I sat through the phase training last week, and I think we receive, it's $13 a student for special education. For gifted and talented education, where we are taking $3.8 million out of our general education dollars to meet the shortfall to cover special ed costs. So, and if you were to take a look at what our operating levy is, total, I think it's around that $3.9 million. And so if the state were to fully fund special education like they are supposed to, we wouldn't have to be going to the taxpayers, and we could do things with gifted and talented much more than we are. So having said that, I think we've got Gail Brownlow running our GT program, and I think she's doing some great things with our students through Destination Imagination, different clubs we have after school, and different opportunities throughout the school day. But it's a total mismatch within the state funding system.
One thing that I noticed on that report that we got, it had every district, and it was a pretty intensive spreadsheet about, it kind of put everybody in a row, and then it told you your total funding piece. And what I noticed right away that stuck out for Albert Lee is that inequity with special ed and how we would, I want to say this right, we're recovering potentially, we're doing much better than other districts in Minnesota on that matching what we're asking the voters to fund. So if we didn't have that, there's other districts that would still above that have to ask for levies, but we do a really good job. It appeared to me right away in managing that. Am I stating that right? Would you say? Yeah.
Okay?
Again, this is food for thought, just for tonight, and we can talk about this moving forward here. But here are some recommended goals for 2019. Continue to develop leaders at the building and team level. And where I'm seeing the biggest difference in our district is our teacher leader teams that are effective at different grade levels throughout the district. The closer they collaborate, the better we are getting to meet our student needs. Culminate community conversations with a high school curricular redesign that meets the needs of students in local industry by 2021. So we've been to Alexandria, we've been to John Double's been to a number of places. We've got good relationships with our business community in town here. And really, how can we reconfigure the high school to provide more pathways for our students to really meet student needs, community needs, and not just continue to, we've made some small shifts, but we really haven't created the more of a CTE pathway that I think should be available to us, to our students. So that's just some thoughts there. Attract and retain talented individuals throughout our school system. That ties in with what we were talking about with the teacher shortage issue. There's different areas we're looking at there, of course. You know, we've got the on-site clinic. We're looking at daycare for next year, for having it available to employees. And what are things we can do? I've testified previously at the legislature for market rate housing, not low-income housing, but market rate housing, so our teachers could afford to live in decent places here in town. And because the focus at the legislature seems to be on low income, and I think there's a significant need for market rate within our community. So those are some pieces under that umbrella. Maintain our fund balance, and you know, Kim and I were talking a little bit, and we saw this from the levy referendum we ran this past the bond referendum past May. We really don't get out to the smaller communities much. We're pretty much Albert Lee centric, and you know, I can count a handful of times I've been out to Clarks Grove here or Hayward or Hollandale since I've been superintendent. So just as something for the board to think about, and I did this in my previous district, but what if we at least once a year visited some of our smaller communities with a study session or a board meeting, and then have an open forum, and then they can come up and share what their perspective of the world is. I think the outreach would be beneficial for the overall district community.
I think that's one of the important pieces, especially, I think you look at Clarks Grove now, you have a lot of the Karen population that are in Clarks Grove. Their ability probably to come into town for meetings or that. I remember years ago, we actually did school board meetings out in the outlying communities more, and I think just from a transparency and an engagement standpoint, we might find more individuals, families that if we meet out there, see what we're doing, and have that availability to engage a little bit more.
And then, again, you know, what I find interesting, and Kim was on the board, and she went through phase 1 and 2 training, 4 or 5 years ago? 5 or 6 years ago?
6 years ago.
Yep. And so just, you know, the feedback she provided me was this is a great refresher that periodically we should, be good for all board members. And without dragging the entire board to the training, is there something that we could possibly do to just keep the board updated and fresh, whether through a phase 3 or something else along those lines? So those are just some thoughts that I have, and board thoughts, or we can talk about other potential goals down the road here.
A couple notes I was taking, a couple thoughts. I like the attract and retain talented individuals. I do think sometimes we need to just focus on the current morale and boosting up teachers and helping them feel appreciated. I'm not saying I want to do a survey. I did end up going to a brown table that ended up being about surveys and surveying your staff, which was really interesting, but I'm not saying we need to have a survey to do that. But I would like to kind of make sure we're reaching out to the current staff and trying to keep them. And then also with the 14% fund balance, I think that's a good thing. I've been convinced that that's a great thing. And I think it's less of an issue with less of some of the grants and stuff that we're not sure of. I think they're a little bit more sure. But if we're going to be doing cuts based on that fund balance and the unknowns only to try to rehire, if that fund balance is going to affect our teacher retention, then I think we do need to maybe look at that, like, if we're not sure at the end of the year kind of thing, because I know how that works. And I do love the board meetings in other communities. I think that'd be fun. I think that'd be a great idea. I'd like to, maybe we could visit them all in a year, that'd be wonderful. So some great ideas.
Some of the things that I had just jotted down were, some of them were Dr. Funk had up. But in one of the trainings that I went to, they talked about, ironically in the governance policy meeting, they talked about stakeholder listening sessions. So it might be a teacher group, it might be a business group, it might be community leaders group, retired teachers, anything like that. They would identify 6 or so stakeholder groups, and they would hold obviously all of us couldn't be there, but maybe 2 board members would be assigned to each stakeholders meeting, and they would just talk about, maybe, what are their insights on how the district is doing, or even what they would suggest, any recommendations, just in a smaller arena where we're putting our listening ears on, and of course it would be they made it clear that it has to be still a controlled environment. It's not to talk about individuals specifically. It's to talk about how we how we're looking to the future, and like I was very interested in the stakeholders group of like businesses, because we can sit and say this is what businesses need, their future workforce needs to look like, but if they're there telling us what they need to look like, then that's just a little more solid. So I like that idea. And then I would like to see, when I was on the board 6 years ago, we talked about bringing in a consultant for one of our work sessions, study sessions on specifically like organizational leadership and or trust and collaboration and those kind of things. And so after our keynote speaker, those 8 pillars, it just brought in some ideas of potential bringing someone in for the board and the superintendent and maybe administrators to just kind of be in a professional development situation ourselves. So those were a couple things, and I would say, that we touched on the rest. So, I do want to, and Mike knows this, but I want to tour all the facilities. So just reminding that. So.
Yeah, one thing that occurs to me that we may consider as a goal in connection with the improvement in the Hammer complex and our athletic facilities, in connection with that movement that we initiated last year, we had several meetings with community members and among ourselves, emphasizing or suggesting that we should emphasize more support for our activities programs, and there's lots of details in connection with that. But I think that the activities, co-curricular activities, are an extremely important aspect of our educational system, and it has to be done right. And And encouraged that Dave attended the session presented by the High School League, is they are finally promoting some pretty good ideas in terms of the value of athletics and co-curricular activities. And I think, I'm not saying we're not doing a good job already, but I think we really need to emphasize that and promote our activities and support our activities. And one sort of corollary to that is that if co-curricular activities are going to be an integral part of our academic or our instructional program, then we really should have people who are trained in instruction leading those activities. And I would like to see, whenever we hire somebody, I don't know as if you could make it a requirement, but it would be really nice if the people that we interview can coach something or can, be a robotics or a chess or anything, rather than just a classroom teacher. So I would like to see an emphasis in supporting our co-curricular activities as one of our goals as well.
Any other questions or comments? Dennis?
I have a question.
Jill, go ahead.
I'm wondering on the growth and proficiency goal at every grade. The slide said that we did not increase at every grade. How many grades did we increase at?
I don't have that information in front of me. I believe the principals all briefed you on that earlier this fall, but I will have Mary Jo provide that to you in an update.
And so that would still be a concern of mine, it seemed to be a stronger worded goal last year, and this year the proposed goal seems to be not as strong wording or kind of just focusing on more local site work. And I think it involves a lot more than just that, curriculum, etc. So I would like to see that goal restated again for this year. Thank you.
Graduation rates?
I think one of the things that we have to keep on our radar and aware of constantly is the technology. We've got to be able to continue to stay up with the technology. I think we're doing a great job of it right now, but I think over the next few years we're going to see that escalate up even more, whether it's through the e-learnings, how can we implement that with the special education. It's frustrating to see the state working right now. The two bases of the state constitution are education and roads and bridges, and what are our most dire things right now? Education and roads and bridges. So locally staying ahead of that, continuing to work and meet the needs of the students, and then tying that technology in with it. And then, as everybody stated, the extracurricular activities, you can't imagine the education that the students get from being a part of that. And I think the more and more we can get them to participate. I'm tired of hearing students say, I can't participate in that because I have to have a job. We need to get rid of that. We've got to get the kids to understand that they're only going to be in high school one time, and whether it's in chess club or it's in debate or whether mock trial, no matter what it is, they're important necessities that every child needs to experience.
And just to tag on to the activities, I would really like to add something where we can continue to research offering those activities at younger levels. Let's get her back in the middle school and let's get it started again. I had a couple people approach me in the last several days asking about that, and I know that's one thing we talked about with the Halverson School. We'd have more room again now to do these things, but not just talking gym activities, not just talking sports, but everyone's got a talent. I mentioned fishing, mentioned trap shooting, chess. I mean, today on the MSHSL website, they were listing a little bit about the debate teams and how that turned out. And I think they had 9 rounds and 2 days of debate. That's not me. Maybe I'll go trap shooting, but I'm not going to debate anyone for 9 rounds in 2 days. But that's somebody's talent. And those kind of things, as Neil mentioned, that we can tag on to. But I guess my biggest takeoff on that is let's start at the younger ages. And maybe then, Dennis, at that point, they'll see the value of doing it. And you've got to wait till I'm in 8th or 9th grade to start something. Well, maybe by 9th or 10th grade, it's time to go out and get a job. Maybe that gives them a chance to be a kid a little bit longer, or to hone their skills in that area that they really like, or find the area that they really do like, enjoy doing.
One thing I forgot to mention in my report earlier, our junior high robotics team is qualified for state. So they will be going to the state competition. They had a local competition here, I think, in Austin last week. They were one of the top teams, and they will be going on to state next week, not this weekend, but the following weekend. So that's different opportunities for kids.
Okay. A lot of good comments, a lot of things that need to be added, I guess, and we'll come back with that. So, any other questions or comments? Okay. I'd entertain a motion then to adjourn.
So move.
Is there a second? Second. Meeting's adjourned.